Jake was sitting on the living room couch, his eyes fixed on Claire's cell phone, which was on the coffee table. The brightness of the screen flashed a bluish tone, illuminating his worried face. Ever since he began to notice that something was wrong, an uneasiness had consumed him. The messages were frequent and, no matter how much he tried to ignore them, curiosity and distrust pushed him towards the device. He knew he shouldn't, but he couldn't resist. With a heavy sigh, Jake picked up his cell phone and unlocked the screen. The messages were from a number he didn't recognize, but the words were clear. "I'm thinking of you. I can't wait to meet again." Jake's heart raced, and a wave of anger and despair coursed through his body. He stood up abruptly, cell phone still in hand, and went to the bedroom, where Claire was organizing some clothes. "Claire," he called, voice shaking with emotion. She turned around, a carefree expression on her face. "What's wrong, Jake? You're hiding something from me. What's with all these messages on your cell phone?" He pressed on, unable to contain his frustration. "They're just friends, Jake. You're being paranoid," Claire replied, looking away. The denial in his voice was evident, but Jake wasn't convinced. "Friends? Don't make me laugh. You know it's not what it seems." He felt his anger rising, and his hands gripped his cell phone tightly. "You always exaggerate. I can't believe you're accusing me of this," Claire responded, now with disdain, as if she were dealing with a child. "I'm not exaggerating. I'm trying to understand why you've been pulling away from me." Jake felt the pressure rising, and the feeling of helplessness consumed him. "Maybe because I can't live with failure," she snapped, her voice high and sharp. "You can't support our household, Jake. That's not what I want for myself. My life would be so much better without you." Those words were like a blow to Jake's gut. He felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "So you're saying you're abandoning me because of money? Is that what you really think of me?" Claire crossed her arms, a look of disdain plastered on her face. "You know I do. I can't live like this anymore. I need someone to make me happy, to give me security. And you're not that person." Heartbroken, Jake watched Claire walk away, hurriedly packing a bag. The conflicting emotions within him turned into a fit of rage. He looked around, his eyes fixed on a painting that hung on the wall, a reminder of better times. Without thinking twice, he walked up to it and, in a gesture of desperation and frustration, broke the glass with a punch. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room, and Claire turned around, startled. "What did you do?" "That's what you did to our marriage. It broke everything," he screamed, his voice cracking with pain. Claire looked at him, a mix of fear and anger in her eyes. "You're out of control, Jake. This is ridiculous." "Ridiculous? You think you're ridiculous? You're about to walk out of my life, and you still have the audacity to call me ridiculous?" He took a deep breath, trying to control the storm of emotions passing through his body. Claire picked up her bag and headed for the door. "I have nothing else to do here. I hope you can find yourself, but I need to go." Jake watched her leave, feeling helpless and lost. The door closed with a bang, and the echo of that knock seemed to reflect the end of a dream he had cherished for so long. The silence that followed was deafening. He looked at the shards of the painting on the floor, a symbol of what had broken between them. Pain and anger mixed in his chest as he wondered how everything had gotten to this point. The life he had dreamed of was gone, and the only thing that remained was a deep, distressing emptiness. Jake woke up before the sun, the morning light still shy, but there was already a new shine in his eyes. After the separation, he had devoted himself entirely to his work, like a castaway clinging to a piece of driftwood in the middle of the ocean. Every extra hour at the office, every penny saved, was like small steps towards a new life, a life he not only dreamed of, but was determined to achieve. Months passed, and the atmosphere around him began to change. He felt different, stronger and more confident, like a man who had risen from the ashes. Claire's memories still tormented him, but now they were more like distant shadows, echoing in his mind but no longer able to overpower him. What was once a home full of disappointments was now transformed into a space of innovation and creativity. Jake got involved in a project that promised to revolutionize the market. The idea, born from his lived experience, began to take shape and attract investors who were increasingly interested. It was a gala night when Jake finally saw his efforts recognized. The room was full of well-dressed people, lively conversations and laughter echoing through the corridors. He looked around, admiring the luxurious surroundings, and felt a pride he had never experienced before. He was one of the most promising young entrepreneurs, a rising star. His heart beat strong, not only because of the achievement, but because of the feeling that he had exceeded all expectations. As he greeted some investors, his mind wandered for a moment, remembering Claire's disdainful look when she left him. "You'll never amount to anything, Jake." Her voice resonated in his mind like a distant echo, but he smiled, not just at others, but at himself. He had become everything she had doubted he could be. "Jake, congratulations. You deserve it," said Lucas, an old friend and college classmate, as he clapped his hands. "I always knew you had it in you." "Thanks, Lucas," Jake replied, his smile radiating genuine happiness. "It's been a long journey, but every step has been worth it." The party continued, and Jake felt more at ease with each passing moment. He stood out in the crowd, speaking to investors and exchanging ideas about his project. The pride he felt was not just for having achieved success, but for having managed to free himself from the chains that tied him to the past. However, even amidst the glitz and glamour, a shadow still loomed over him. Claire's betrayal wasn't something that would go away quickly. It was a constant reminder that even though he conquered the business world, there was a part of him that was still wounded. He didn't want to think about her, but it was impossible to completely ignore the marks she had left. "Jake, you look radiant tonight," a woman next to him commented, interrupting his thoughts. She had a charming smile and eyes that sparkled like stars. "You really stand out among everyone here." "Thanks," Jake replied, a little surprised by the attention. "I'm just trying to enjoy the moment. You should do this more often." "The business world needs more people like you," she said, winking. Jake smiled, thanking him for his kindness. But deep down, he knew that the true value of his journey wasn't just in the success, but in the ability to pick himself up, rebuild himself, and learn to love himself again. He was at a new beginning, and although there were echoes of the past, he was determined to move forward, leaving Claire and her betrayals behind in the dust of a life that no longer defined him. The party continued, and as Jake mingled among the guests, he felt like he was finally ready to write his own story, away from the shadows of those who once underestimated him. The future shined before him, and he was more than prepared to embrace it. Jake watched the city through the window of his office at the top of the building, the sunlight reflecting off his tan skin. He had achieved what many considered a dream. He was the CEO of a thriving technology company, respected and admired. However, amidst the glamour and success, he felt a deep emptiness, a loneliness that settled in his chest. The life that had been filled with expectations and promises now seemed like a mere facade. The echo of Claire's laughter still resonated in his mind, a sound that now brought him only anguish. That afternoon, as he reviewed reports, his mind wandered. He remembered the days when he sat with Claire at the small table in his old kitchen, dreaming about the future, dreaming about success. The image of her, so confident and radiant, almost made him smile, but soon the memory turned to pain. "If only I had been good enough," he muttered to himself, a thought that had become a mantra in his mind. Meanwhile, Claire, in her new reality, faced a series of disappointments. After leaving Jake, she quickly realized that the life she had imagined would be very different from what it actually was. The relationship with her new partner fell apart, and she now found herself struggling to pay bills and maintain a lifestyle she could no longer afford. In her apartment, she stared in the mirror, trying to find traces of the confident woman she once was. "You're still beautiful, Claire," she whispered to herself, but the truth consumed her like poison. That night, Jake received an invitation to a networking event. Initially hesitant, he decided it was time to get out of his bubble of loneliness. "Who knows, I might find someone to talk to," he thought. When she arrived at the event, she felt the vibrant energy of the people around her, but even so, the feeling of disconnection continued. He exchanged a few words with potential business partners, but his mind always returned to the same point: Claire. Deep down, Jake wondered if she was thinking about him. He wondered if, in some way, she regretted what she had done. She had her chance, he thought, trying to shake the thought away, but the doubt persisted. He went to the bar and ordered a whiskey, looking for some liquid courage to face the night. Meanwhile, Claire, who was also present, tried to blend in with the other guests. The event was an opportunity to rise again, to show that he could still shine. If I can get a contact here, maybe everything will get better, she thought, but insecurity consumed her. With every laugh she heard, with every look she met, she felt more and more lost. I'm not that Claire anymore, he thought, with a knot in his stomach. The tension in the air was palpable as Jake and Claire met eyes for the first time in years. The world around them seemed to dissipate, and time stopped for a moment. Claire smiled, trying to hide her nervousness, but Jake wasn't put off. He watched her with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. Look who's here, he muttered to himself, a sardonic smile forming on his lips. Jake, Claire exclaimed, her voice betraying a nervousness she couldn't hide. It's good to see you. He tilted his head, studying her. Likewise, Claire. How are you? The question was asked with a coldness that surprised her. I'm trying to get back on my feet, she said, forcing a smile. What about you? I heard your company is growing. Yeah, we're doing good, Jake replied, pride showing in his voice, but he didn't offer any further details. Claire noticed the difference between the man she had left behind and the one before her now. There was a confidence that had been missing before, an aura of success that made her uneasy. The silence that followed was filled with memories, longings, and unspoken regrets. Jake felt a surge of anger mixed with something he couldn't identify. He didn't want to feel sorry for her, didn't want her weakness to affect him. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? He said, trying to keep his tone light. Yes, full of surprises, Claire agreed, her eyes straying to the floor. She knew she had made mistakes, but she still had hope that she could make some things right. If you need help with anything, I'm here, she said, trying to sound confident. Jake raised an eyebrow, a wry smile forming on his lips. Don't worry, Claire. I'm fine. And as he said that, he turned around, leaving her behind, without looking back. The night continued, but the feeling that something was about to change hung in the air. The atmosphere at the networking event was vibrant, full of lively conversation and laughter. Jake moved between the groups, a glass of red wine in hand, as his eyes scanned the crowd for new opportunities. However, his mind was still stuck in the memories of the past, a whirlwind of emotions that he tried to bury under the weight of the success he had finally achieved. The bright lights and the surrounding music couldn't drown out the feeling of an old ghost that accompanied him. It was then that, suddenly, she appeared. Claire. Jake's heart raced, and he almost let the glass slip from his hands. She was there, in an elegant dress that accentuated her curves, but there was something different in her gaze, an insecurity he didn't remember seeing before. Claire was talking to a group of people, but when their eyes met, time seemed to stop. Her smile was shallow, as if she were trying to convince not just the others, but herself that everything was okay. Jake, she said, approaching later as he tried to ignore her. There was a slight hesitation in his voice. Are you okay? We haven't seen each other in a while. I'm fine, Claire, Jake replied, his voice firm but restrained. What about you? How has your life been? Well, I'm working at the tech company next door, she said, trying to sound casual, but Jake could hear the tension in her words. It's a challenge, but I'm learning a lot. Jake arched an eyebrow, a wry smile appearing on his lips. That's interesting. And how's life, personal? Claire hesitated, the expression on her face revealing a weakness he never thought he'd see. Complicated. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're successful. I'm happy for you. I'm glad you're happy, he replied, his voice revealing more contempt than he intended. Looks like you found your way. She forced a smile, but Jake could feel the fragility behind it. Claire had always been in control, always the one who decided what to say and how to act. But now, before him, she seemed a shadow of the woman who had left him because of his supposed mediocrity. I heard you have a new startup, she commented, trying to change the subject. We need to talk more about this. It could be a good opportunity for both of us. I don't know if there's much to talk about, Claire. Our stories took very different turns, didn't they? He couldn't help but be teased. There was a bitter satisfaction in seeing her insecurity. Claire opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to fail. She looked at him as if she were trying to find a trace of the man she once loved. Jake, I'm not who you thought I was anymore, he interrupted, frustration starting to build in his chest. I am no longer that man you despised. I know I made mistakes, she said, her voice now almost pleading. But things have changed. I have changed. Jake felt a mix of anger and compassion. Has it changed? You're working as an assistant at a company that's nowhere near as reputable as mine. What do you really want, Claire? A fresh start? She took a deep breath, and he could see the tears forming in her eyes. I just wanted you to know that I'm so sorry. I miss what we had. What did we have? Jake repeated, each word coming out choked with a pain he had tried to bury. You said goodbye to me because I wasn't good enough. Now you want to come back? For what? To make me feel less? To remind me of your betrayal? The tension between them was palpable. Claire looked away, and Jake felt a rush of satisfaction as he realized that even in her new success, she was still affected by her past decisions. I can't change the past, Jake, she murmured, finally looking vulnerable. But I'm really trying to be a better person. Maybe it was time you thought about it sooner, Jake replied, the coldness in his voice revealing the pain he still carried. He turned away, the need to get away from her overcoming his curiosity to understand her intentions. When he got home, Jake plopped down on the couch, his mind still reeling from the encounter. He looked out the window, taking in the city lights, a symbol of everything he had achieved. But even with his success, Claire's presence still affected him. She didn't know him anymore. He was no longer the man she had left behind, and that filled him with a feeling of victory and, at the same time, sadness. Jake was sitting at his dark wooden desk, eyes fixed on his computer. The environment around him was modern and minimalist, reflecting the success he had built so hard. However, his mind was far from work. He couldn't stop thinking about Claire and the resume he had received days ago. It was a cruel twist of fate, but he couldn't help but smile as he imagined her expression as she walked into that interview room, unaware that the man she had once underestimated was now her boss. The door opened and Claire entered, her pale face betraying a mixture of surprise and nervousness. She wore a dress that once fit her like a glove, but now felt awkward, as if she were trying to fit into a world that wasn't hers. Jake watched her, a suppressed smile on his lips, as she settled into the opposite chair. Thanks for coming, Claire. Let's get started, he said, maintaining a professional tone. Claire took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. Thanks for the opportunity, Jake. I really need it. Her voice shook slightly, but she tried hard to sound confident. Jake, in turn, was having fun with the situation. He knew it was a golden chance to explore how far she had fallen since leaving him. Let's talk about your past experiences. What can you bring to our team? Her eyes sparkled for a moment as she tried to remember her past conquests. I worked in digital marketing for 3 years and have a good understanding of, but Jake interrupted her, leaning forward with a wry smile. Sorry, but I need to remind you that we are a technology company. Are you comfortable moving around this area? Claire hesitated, a bead of sweat dripping down her temple. Of course, I'm willing to learn. I've always been good at adapting. Adapting, yes. But you also mentioned that you were interested in working for a company that values ethics and transparency, right? Jake knew the reference was direct and wanted to see her reaction. She swallowed hard, her gaze fading for an instant. Yes, and I truly believe that. Do you believe you could be a valuable addition here? He interrupted her again, his voice now more incisive. Considering your recent track record, do you think you could truly maintain the ethics you hold dear? Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. Jake could see her internal struggle. She wanted to defend herself, but the reality of her situation weighed heavily on her shoulders. I'm willing to prove that I've changed. Jake watched her, a mix of satisfaction and pity flooding his heart. Profe, who? You know, Claire, I too was led to believe in empty promises once. That was in the past, Jake. I was wrong, but everyone deserves a second chance, she exclaimed, frustration beginning to show in her voice. You talk as if I should do this for you. The truth is, I am not what you left behind. I am not the man you betrayed. I have become someone who doesn't need anyone to validate his achievements, he replied, tone firm but expression neutral. Claire recoiled, as if he had struck her. You can't just write me off like that. Actually, I can, and I will. Your presence here is not only inappropriate, it is a risk to our company. Jake saw the paleness of her face increase and, for a moment, he hesitated. But after everything he had been through, there was no room for compassion. I really need this job, Jake, she murmured, her voice now barely above a whisper. You need to, but I can't help. This isn't about needing, Claire. It's about what you did. I can't allow someone who betrayed the team's trust to be part of it again. Jake stood up, indicating that the interview had come to an end. Claire stood there, frozen, as he walked away. He knew it had been tough, but he finally felt like he was regaining the control that Claire had once taken from him. And with that, a new feeling of peace began to settle in his heart. Jake sat back in his office chair, analyzing the papers spread out in front of him, but his mind was far from those bureaucratic issues. The interview with Claire still echoed in his thoughts. The way she had tried to appear confident, even with the nervousness evident in her voice, bothered him. It was as if she was trying to fit into a world he had built without her and, at the same time, trying to destabilize it. As soon as Claire left the office, Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the tension that had been generated between them. He stood up, determined not to let the emotions of the past affect him again. But as he walked down the hall, her words echoed in his mind. You still love me, Jake. We can start over. I can change, she had said, with a look that mixed hope and despair. But Jake knew there was no room for more lies in his life. He had redeemed himself, built something from the ruin, and could not allow the past to interfere again. However, he couldn't ignore what Claire had hinted at. He turned to one of his colleagues, Lucas, who was passing by in the hallway. Did you find her interview strange? Jake asked, trying to diffuse the tension. Lucas frowned. She seemed nervous, but who wouldn't be? After all, you are her boss now, Lucas replied, with a slight smile. Jake nodded, but his mind was far away. Later, after finishing work, Jake decided to go to the meeting room, where Claire worked. He needed to confront her. The room was empty except for Claire, who was staring at the computer, apparently absorbed in her work. Jake walked in, and when she heard the door close, she looked up. Jake, she said casually, but he heard the tension in her voice. We need to talk, he stated, his voice firm, about the interview and your intention in applying here. Claire sat up straighter, trying to regain her composure. I just want a chance, Jake. Everyone makes mistakes, right? Mistakes are one thing, Claire. Your betrayal was something else entirely, he replied, without hesitation. You can't just go back and expect everything to be the same as before. I am no longer the man you knew. She stood up, trying to get closer to him. But you still have feelings for me. I know you feel. We can work together. We can make this work. No, Claire. I can't and I don't want to. And, by the way, you need to know that I found out about your plans. You were trying to sabotage the company, weren't you? Claire's look turned from confidence to despair. He continued. You have no idea what I went through to get here, and I'm not going to let you ruin everything because of your insecurities. Silence hung in the air, heavy as a cloak. Claire, visibly shaken, tried to defend herself. Jake, this isn't what you think. I just want... Fired, he interrupted, his voice firm. You are not suitable for this company. Employees can't trust you. Claire stood in shock, eyes wide, as the reality of what was happening began to set in. You cannot do that. Think about what we're saying here. I'm thinking, Jake replied, feeling a wave of relief. I'm thinking about how I deserve a cheating-free work environment. And, most importantly, I'm thinking about how I can finally move on. He turned to leave, but before opening the door, he looked back one last time. I hope you can find yourself, Claire. But from now on, you're on your own. He left, feeling as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Claire's words would haunt him for some time, no doubt. But for the first time in years, Jake felt like he had finally found the peace he had been searching for. Fate had been cruel, but it had also given him an opportunity to free himself. And now, he was ready for a new beginning.